Now, some big admissions from a Democrat insider. Now, there was an undercover video from Project Veritas showing DNC Vice Chair David Hogg revealing that Jill Biden's chief of staff allegedly held a lot of power.
The bigger issue was like the inner circle that was around Biden. That's it.
And I can't stress you enough.
Like Jill Biden's chief of staff, like had an enormous amount of power.
Joe Biden?
Jill Biden's chief of staff.
That was like an open secret at that. Like I would avoid him. Like he was scary.
What was his name?
Anthony Trump.
Now, this is something that, a number of people were speculating about for some times, and this revelation really puts moments like this into question.
We're grateful that Jill is here today. Heard that clapping, it wasn't for me. Today at the top of our meeting, Jill's going to give an update on the House initiative, White House initiative.
Adam, what impact does this have on people's trust in institutions?
Well, this is having a massive impact. Even Democrats are questioning their entire party. They're questioning, how did this man even end up in a position of power? Speaking for myself personally, as a former Democrat, when I saw him running for office, I asked the question as to why. What is the motive behind all of this? Because it was very clear that he was falling apart. It was very clear he was belligerent. And it's also clear that the reason they wanted him is because he was controllable. They were able to push all types of agendas without any sort of fight from him, and he got to have the title as president. And Jill Biden got to be the first lady. And so everyone was wielding power around him, but no one was actually thinking about the American people and what was actually happening. So no, a lot of people are not having trust in institutions in the same way that they did a decade ago, at least.
Yeah, fair enough. And look, you can understand when those sorts of allegations are made that people really question even the most basic of institutions' functions. Now, onto a Colorado sports brand, and it's found itself in some trouble with the state's anti-discrimination law. What's the story here?
Yeah, essentially, their new law is an anti-discriminatory law, but it's a very progressive anti-discriminatory law. And essentially, it's trying to codify that if you use certain language in advertising, that it can be seen as discriminatory, and that every person in Colorado is supposed to have some sort of right to non-discriminatory advertising. So if you're someone who is transgender and believes that even though you're a biological man, you're actually a woman, someone saying that trans women are men is someone that is being offensive to you. And so that could lead to all different types of lawsuits and things of that nature. So XXXY is suing because they're putting their business in jeopardy by saying biological truths, that biological men are men, regardless if they wear a dress or not. So this is essentially why they're trying to fight back against the state, and I hope they do well.
Well, and we will see how that goes. But, I mean, this year is not a situation in isolation. Trump's threat to cut federal funding over the admission of trans athletes in women's sport has prompted a rule change in California. What's happened here? What's the latest with this?
Yeah, essentially, they're reacting to Trump, but they're giving a lukewarm response. So the championships that they have, obviously, there are trans athletes who are competing, and it's, of course, biological men always competing in women's games. So what they did was, for the spots that the trans athletes were taking up, they added additional spots for the women who lost their spots because of the trans men being there, which is superficially fine, but at the same time, it doesn't remove these trans athletes who have a disadvantage or who have an advantage over the women. It doesn't remove them from actually winning. So they can still take medals. They still can win these competitions. So it's a moot point. It's like, okay, sure, we'll have more women be involved as they lose. Like, that's not any sort of fairness. And for them to think that this actually abides by what Trump is actually wanting, I think is far-fetched. But we'll see what happens. I think that there's more changes that are coming down the pipe. But if they think this is it, that this is definitely not the solution.
Well, there really is a big difference between participation and competition. So I take your point there that it is a moot point. Now, our next story is almost amusing because when you think of the US Secret Service, you think of discipline. But a couple of officers have found themselves suspended this week in, well, what I would say is a rather unusual set of circumstances.
Yes, it's an unusual set of circumstances when it comes to two Secret Service members fighting each other and it being caught on camera outside of Obama's location. But it just goes to show you the level of disarray that is stemming from the federal government, and especially coming from the Biden administration. And I would wager that some of these people, I don't know these particular agents if they were hired during the Biden administration, but there was a lot of chaos that was happening. We can also look at what happened with Donald Trump and the assassination attempt and the failures of the Secret Service that led for him to be even shot in the first place. So none of this shocks me, but the Secret Service has a little bit of tumultuous history. We've heard, situations of them getting prostitutes in foreign nations and things like that. So this doesn't strike me as completely abnormal.
Maybe they're not as disciplined as we all give them credit for. Now, we've also learned that the FBI is revisiting a few things which may have potentially fallen off their to-do list, like the White House cocaine find. What's this all about, and should we be expecting any action here?
Personally, I don't think there's going to be any sort of action. We're talking a small amount of cocaine, not that there should be any cocaine in the White House, but it was very clear that the Biden administration wasn't going to take this particular situation seriously. For all I know, it could have been a staffer who left some sort of cocaine in the White House. I don't know if this is that big of a deal. If it was a lot of cocaine, if it was a large mountain of cocaine, then it would be a different story. But it looks like it was for personal usage. They can do their investigation, but I don't think much will come from it.
Now, on to Democratic Senator Michael Bennet, and he's had a crack at his own party, his party's brand, I should say, and I'm sure there's some truth in it, but shouldn't these concerns be raised and dealt with internally? No.
I actually like it that it's public.
Okay.
It shows that it tells the American public that they're finally waking up just a little bit. There's a little bit of glimpse, a little bit of a hope for them realizing that the Democratic Party is lost, and they finally recognize that they're a bit lost. And some of, especially the Blue Dog Democrats, are getting fed up of the progressives who've taken over, who've led this charge of being anti-male and talking about patriarchy and everything is oppressive. So yeah, there's a bit of disgust, and I'm glad it's finally happening. I'm one of those Democrats who walked away and became an independent because of this very thing. It is a party that is not appealing anymore. It doesn't speak to the majority of the American population. They cater to a niche audience of typically wealthy elitists, coastal elitists, and they don't speak the same language I do. They don't have the same concerns that I have. So I'm glad that he's actually being public about it, because whether, the reason for him saying this is because he's anti-Trump, whatever, but he is speaking some truth, that their brand is actually terrible.
Mm. And I suppose for people out there, like you who are worried about the brand, you're hoping that they maybe have just worked it all out. Now, the US's enemies have criticised Donald Trump's proposed $175 billion Golden Dome missile shield. Is this meant to be a joke?
No, actually, he's very serious about it. I believe it was during Trump's first administration where Space Force was brought about. So he's very serious about reinforcing space, having some sort of space command, looking out for America's interests when it comes to space as well. Of course, North Korea and Russia aren't going to like it. Trust and believe, if they were the ones doing it, they wouldn't be complaining. So, they're saying that this might turn into another space race or arms race or some sort of race. But I don't really care what Russia or North Korea thinks about this. What I do care about is actually how much is it really going to cost? Some estimates are saying that his numbers are very conservative, where the real estimates may be 4 times the amount that he's claiming. So is this worth it? And actually, how long is it going to take? Is this just going to be more government bloat? And that's the thing that we should be concerned with.
Yeah, that is a definite question that the American people, I'm sure, are very interested in. Now, NPR is suing the government over Trump's executive order, obviously, which was aimed at the public media. What's the claim, and does it have any merit?
Yeah, their claim is that Donald Trump is impeding on their First Amendment rights, but he's not. The reality is that NPR's budget is about 1% coming from the federal government. Even if it was 15 or 50%, NPR is a private organization, and they're not entitled to federal funding. And that's the biggest problem when it comes to NPR. They believe that they're entitled to the consistent, the status quo of receiving money from the federal government, just like much of the federal government or much of the apparatus that's attached to the federal government around DC especially. So no, you're not entitled to our tax money. It's not Trump's money, it's my money too. So if there are questions about your conduct as a private organization, the federal government doesn't have to fund you. And so very clearly, 99% of your budget comes from elsewhere. Fill in the gap.
Yeah, totally. He's not stopping them from saying what they're saying. He's just saying that the American people aren't going to pay for it. They're two totally different things. Now onto the US university scene, and Trump has suggested that Harvard cut its international student intake to 15%. Now he's gone pretty hard on the Ivy League universities. What's this latest barb? What's the purpose of it?
Yeah, when it comes to Harvard, they're once again upset that the gravy train is ending when it comes to federal funding, even though they have over $50 billion in endowment. They're essentially a mid-tier hedge fund. They still think that they should get as much money as they possibly can from the federal government, and they especially don't like it that Trump is calling into question how many foreign students that they bring in, and for what reason. And it's very clear. I mean, it's an open secret. You charge a crazy amount of money for foreign students to come into your school. You make a lot of money that way. And so you just keep increasing the amount of foreign students who can come through. And so they're calling into question the quality of students that are coming in, the reasons for taking in all these foreign students. And you know what? I'm all for it. I'm all for them looking out for because very clearly they're not very good at delegating how many, terrorist, sympathetic kind of students who are coming through who aren't here for the American experience, who are here to alter our society to some degree. And granted, that's not all of them, but they're obviously not taking Trump's threats seriously. And so he's exercising what he is saying.
Oh, he is absolutely exercising what he is saying. Adam Coleman, thank you so much for joining us.